This is the third devlog in the series for my game Slaughter Cats, a 1 to 4 player beat-em-up platformer coming to PC and hopefully Xbox and PlayStation. I've previously been working on the levels for my Japanese environment and decided I'd like to add a bit more variety to these levels, and so I decided to add a more Asian inspired level for the final level in the environment. My initial idea was to have a rice field level, as these landscapes in Asia can often be very expansive and impressive. When thinking about it some more, I thought creating a vertical rice field landscape would look really cool, similar to places in Thailand, Vietnam and Indonesia. I went about using the sculpt tool to build some hills first, and then I used the flatten tool to create layered flat rice fields. After a while of going through this, I could tell it didn't quite look how I envisioned, and especially at a distance, sides of the layered rice fields looked somewhat jagged, and the layers of the rice fields seemed too far apart. As I wasn't really happy with how the landscape had turned out, I thought I'd try a slightly different level concept. Initially I thought about just having a flat rice field environment with hills in the distance, but I thought it would maybe look a little bland and wouldn't work so well with the graphics, so I thought adding some more verticality to the level would work well. I always thought the landscapes in Ninh Binh in Vietnam were amazing, with a combination of limestone cliffs, dense vegetation, and brightly coloured rice fields, so I thought this could look good within the game. I went about building the cliffs around the level using some brushes to get the right look for the cliffs. While this looked vaguely okay, I knew in order to make this landscape really look good and how I wanted it to look in my head, I needed to get the correct looking foliage on these cliffs, as getting the right colour and look really sells the landscape. I experiment a lot with different foliage, experiment with different plants to get something which fit with the Asian theme and looks similar to the plants in this environment in real life. Once I'd decided on the right plants, I experimented a ton with the size and colour of the plants to get a realistic looking colour which matched the environment and get a size which looked realistic enough but weren't so small that too many instances were being spawned. I was using the procedural foliage tool to generate the foliage on the cliffs, setting different parameters for different plant meshes to dictate at what angles the plants would spawn, how close they could be to one another, and the spawn patterns so as to produce realistic vegetation growth. While I thought the results of my experimentation looked good, the performance wasn't great, as there were tens of thousands of plants being spawned, and they had default LOD parameters, which meant thousands of the closer meshes were showing some of the higher quality meshes, with hundreds or thousands of polygons. So I went about going through all the meshes used, removing all but one of the LODs, so only a low quality imposter would show, which would dramatically increase performance and meant there would be no transition between different meshes, which could cause a distraction when the changes were noticeable. Once I was confident in the cliffs and the foliage on them, I decided to add a river which split into two into the scene, as I think it really adds a different element to the scene and really makes the landscape that more beautiful in Ninh Binh and in my game. I had trouble getting the water exactly how I wanted, so I was trying to get a kind of murky colour to the water, either a dark brown or dark green, much the same as you'd see in Ninh Binh, but after experimenting with water materials for a few hours, I was unable to come up with water exactly looking how I envisioned. Either the water would be murky but too bright, or dark but transparent, and the edge of the water would have this unnatural looking saturation to them. I'm leaving this issue for now as it looks okay, but I'm hoping I'll find a way to do it in the future as I continue with development, or if there's more flexibility with the water materials added as future versions get released. If not, I'll have to come back and try and figure out a solution or workaround. Maybe just adding a secondary plane with a shader underneath may work, and could look okay if I don't find anything better. I then decided to add the last main component to the level, which was the rice fields. I wanted to have changing colours in the rice fields similar to what is in Ninh Binh during certain periods of the year. I decided to have a yellowish field and a bright green field and thought the colour contrast would look good. I went about adding rectangular rice field plots all over the remaining flat land in the level with procedural foliage tool. I switched between the two colour types so the contrast would look more stark. I thought it looked okay, but the initial plot size I created I thought was too big and didn't really line up with how I wanted the rice fields to look. So I decided to go even smaller and half the plot size, and then have them more long and rectangular, more like how they appear along the rivers in Ninh Binh. I had surrounded the viewable area with cliffs so players couldn't see out into the empty level, but one of the beautiful things about these large vistas in real life is the distant cliffs fading off into the background. So I went about copying the landscape and expanding it, and then only keeping the outer edges of the level, which included high limestone cliffs. so you could see the higher cliffs on the outer reaches of the level fading into the background. When I had completed this, I was really happy with the overall look, but I wanted to have a really sunny, bright environment to really show the environment off. So I adjusted the lighting to really make the environment shine, and adding in some volumetric fog and clouds to add extra depth to the level. I thought I'd add a few extra buildings to make the environment seem somewhat inhabited, considering there's all these rice fields. I also added in some birds to add in an extra element to the level, although they do appear in all my other levels at this point. I also had a large mountain in the background, which is also there in my other Asian-inspired environments, to tie the levels together. I've also considered adding people working in the fields, but still debating whether it's worth the effort and whether it would look good and actually add anything to the scene. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the results this far, and I'd say the backdrop is almost complete. I'm sure as my game continues to evolve, I'll come back and modify things, but for the time being, I'll move on to other things. At this point in the level, I only have the level backdrop done, and I still haven't really worked on the playable part of the level, with the enemy areas and platforming sections. I'll come back to this and show the process in a future devlog. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the channel, and you can also wishlist the game on Steam if you're interested. The link is in the description.